Okay, today's tutorial is how to crochet a half double crochet stitch. I've already made a chain and let's get started. Now you can start working in these chains, but let me show you. If you turn to the side and you see those humps, almost like little scales on the back of a dragon, if you work into those humps, this edge will be a little cleaner, a little neater, and if you're going to put a border on this, your stitches are already there and you don't have to hunt or invent stitches to put a border on. I always prefer to go into the back hump unless the pattern tells me not to. Okay, so we're going to go into the third chain from the hook. Remember, this on our hook does not count. This is 1, 2, and 3. Half double crochet. We're going to yarn over, and again 1, 2, and 3. We're going to go into that hump, grab some yarn, and 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, and we're going to pull through all 3. Okay, let's do that again. Yarn over, go into our next hump, grab us some yarn, yarn over, and pull through all 3. And we're going to do this all the way down the line. Here's our next. Yarn over, pull through all 3. Here's our next. 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, go through all 3. And we have 3 left. See that? We have 3 left. Yarn over, I'm going to show you a couple of things with how we're going to turn, okay? And we should have 10 stitches, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This doesn't quite look like it, but remember, this is that 2 chains that we skipped because we started working into the 3rd chain from the hook. So this is going to count as a half double crochet, these 2 chains. Now it's a little tricky because this is a stitch and it doesn't quite look like it. This is where your stitch markers come in handy. Okay, you're going to put this. Now you can clearly see our 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Until you get a little bit more experience under your belt, please save yourself some aggravation. Get these little stitch markers. They will help some frustration. They'll help you recognize until you can recognize without them. All right, so let's turn our work. We're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and we're going to turn our work. Now some patterns will tell you that this chain 2 counts as a stitch. If this chain 2 counts as a stitch, we are not going to go into this stitch. This is going to be our beginning stitch. You see that? If your pattern says that this turning chain counts as a stitch, we're going to start right here because this hole right here belongs to this turning chain. So if this counts as a stitch, we're going to skip this and we're going to go to the next one. All right, so let's say our pattern says that our turning chain counts as a stitch. All right, so we're going to yarn over. Remember, we're not going to go into here. We're going to go into the next one. And we're going to, just like we did below, through all three. Now, to save ourselves some aggravation, in this chain 2, we need to put a stitch marker so that we can recognize it. You see that? Put your stitch marker in there. Yarn over, and here are our stitches. Make sure that you are pulling up both parts of this V. Pull your yarn through. 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over. Okay. And we're going to do this all the way down. And we have 3 left. Yarn over, pull through all 3, yarn over, and pull through all 3. Now it can be a little difficult to get into this stitch with the stitch marker in, so we're going to take that out, and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to try to get into, make sure we get into, you see, make sure we get in there and pull through. Okay, we're going to chain 2, and we're going to turn our work. We're going to put this stitch marker back in the top of this chain. You got chain 1, chain 2. We're going to put our stitch marker back because the pattern, right, says that this counts as your first stitch. Which means that that little hole goes with this post. It should look like this. That hole goes with this post. So we're going to go into this one. Chain, yarn over, pull through all 3. Yarn over, pull through all 3. And we're going to do this all the way down the line. And I'm going to show you a little something when it comes to having these holes that this creates, because this will create a hole. You see, there's a hole up at the top, a hole at the bottom, because when we are counting that turning chain as a stitch, that turning chain is not as thick as an actual stitch, so it will leave these holes, and I'm going to show you how you can alleviate that if the pattern will allow it. And you see it's a little hard to get through the top of this chain with the stitch marker in, so we're going to take that out and we're going to yarn over, and we're going to get into, and it can be a little fiddly getting into the top of a turning chain. Alright, just work it, it'll get in there. Okay, you see those holes on either side? Because we're counting those turning chains as stitches. So I'm going to show you what to do to get rid of that. Okay, so we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, turn our work. Now we're not going to count this as the first stitch. We're going to go ahead and go into this first stitch. So we're going to yarn over, and we're going to go in and pull through all 3. Now the turning chain is not our first stitch. The top, right here, the top of the actual half double crochet stitch is now our first stitch. Okay, then you're not going to mess up your count. I'll count with you. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We got to get into this turning chain right here. You got to get in there, and it's always a little tight to get it in there. Do your best. Sometimes, you know, even those of us who've been doing it for years can have a hard time getting in there. Okay, now I'm going to show you on the way back through. Chain 2, we're going to turn our work. We're not going to count this chain, this turning chain as a stitch. We're going to go straight into our first stitch. Yarn over and pull through all 3. Because that is our first stitch, we're going to put our stitch marker back in there. That's our first stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and now we have an actual stitch, and it's easier to get into, and you can see it at the top. And 10. And we're going to go back through one more time so then I can show you with the holes and without the holes. Okay, so we are not going to count this. We're going to go into the first, put our stitch marker back, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and see, this is so easy. We can even go in here with the stitch marker and see how much easier that is to go into the actual stitch instead of having to fiddle with that turning chain. Okay, now let's take a look at this. See, we've got holes where we're counting that turning chain as it looks like we dropped a stitch. It looks like a big hole here, and when you come up here, there are none. There are no holes. It looks nice and tight. It doesn't look like we forgot something. And when you are putting a border on a project, these holes can be extra significant if you're having to go through them to put a border on. They really become prominent in some cases. So if the pattern says that, you know, that you can do without it, then I would definitely do without counting that turning chain, because it just looks so much nicer. Look, nice and full compared to down here. Okay, that is our half double crochet. Please join me. I'm going to continue to do some of these tutorials for some other simple stitches. Practice this and enjoy.